Okay, thank you everyone for joining the Florida Veterans Business Outreach Center today. We're going to talk a little bit about small business certifications and which ones might be right for your business. And before we get started, I'd like to say that we're recording this so we can share it with our clients and post it on our website so that those who cannot attend can still benefit from it. So in order to minimize the background noise, we'd like to have you muted if possible, but we encourage you to ask questions throughout the presentation, and there'll be some time at the end also to ask questions. So you can also use the chat box or raise your hand, and we will recognize you for questions. The Florida Veterans Business Outreach Center is funded in part through a cooperative agreement with Gulf Coast State College and the U.S. Small Business Administration, or SBA. All opinions, conclusions, and/or recommendations expressed herein are those of the presenter and do not necessarily reflect the views of the SBA. Even though our office is located in the Panhandle, Florida, we serve clients throughout Florida. We assist military veterans or members transitioning to civilian life, veterans, active Guard and Reserve members, and all spouses of all of those groups who want to start a business or grow a business. We do this through the Boots to Business sessions on military bases, through reboot classes at non-military sites, and through various outreach and training programs in Florida. And we also provide individual business counseling services, and we're honored to share our expertise and bring in experts such as Marc Goldschmitt. I'm pleased to introduce Marc Goldschmitt, CEO of Goldschmitt and Associates, which is headquartered in Reston, Virginia. His business is certified as a service-disabled, veteran-owned business and is located in a designated hub zone and as an 8A small business. Therefore, he has not only the professional expertise in the area of small business certifications, but he also has personal experience in this space. He holds a bachelor's degree and a master's degree in electrical engineering from Rice University, and he's earned the coveted PMP, or Project Management Professional Certification. Mr. Goldschmitt and his team have worked with other VBOCs and the SBA's Office of Veteran Business Development. He has presented at the National Veteran Small Business Coalition, at universities, and for many organizations. And they work through civilian and military government agencies, state and local governments, and educational institutes, commercial and nonprofits, providing expertise in technology, engineering, management, and analytics. So with that, thank you, Marc, for taking your time to share your expertise today. And I'm going to turn it over to you so that you can control the slides.
Okay, thank you very much, Janice. I see we've got a couple of folks. What I'd like to do is keep this relatively informal, have questions and answers as we go. The objective is to help you get ready, and the focus has primarily been in the presentations I've been doing work with the federal government. But when we get into the things like the small business certifications, while it looks like and kind of quacks like a duck, it really addresses things for the commercial environment also. When you get into government contracting, you tend to hear things like 8A or SDVOSB, woman-owned small business, hub zone. One thing to remember is every one of those is a small business. And most of the problems and challenges faced by government contractors as a small business are the same things that are faced by commercial entities as a small business. It's a slightly different world. And as you make a choice with your businesses, which way you want to go, it helps to understand what are the advantages, what are the disadvantages of each. Understand that a lot of the information that you hear from a lot of folks is urban myth that is far from correct. So it really is getting to an understanding of the business and what steps you need to do to be a successful business, then what steps you need to do to be a successful government contractor, and what steps you need to do to become a successful 8A or SDVOSB or hub zone or woman-owned small business. The steps, like I say, commercial are almost the same. Looks like I advanced the slide. Magic. I didn't even intend to do that. Certifications, and again, this is in the context of 8A. It was intended to be for a service disabled vet small business, how do you become a 8A? And when I got into it, it had to do more with, why do you want to do this in the first place? Basically, as we go in here, if you look at here, the real thing is you don't introduce yourself as, hi, I'm a service disabled vet, or hi, I'm an 8A. It's really, what do you deliver of value? I sat in a number of presentations where, hi, I'm an SDVOSB. I do anything for anybody, anywhere, anytime, cheap. Where's my contract? Other than a good laugh after you leave, you really leave with nothing. And I've been in some where it's, here, I understand this is your challenge. Look at what I can do to solve your biggest nightmare. That stuff that keeps you up at night, the stuff that keeps you worried, that's my specialty. I can fix that. You'll get a follow-up call. So as we go through this, the presentation, it really is, the certifications help if you can deliver value. If you can't deliver value, certifications are absolutely no value. The first piece, whether you're commercial or government, is the business planning, governance, and strategy. Who are you? What are you doing? Why are you doing it? Why do you think you can be effective in growing a business in that area? And it's understanding your market. So as you look at, again, commercial versus government, I'm assuming all of you are veteran businesses, correct? I've got you all on mute. Okay. So this is really addressed, kind of like I said, to the veteran businesses. For those of you that are looking at your new business, there's a couple of programs out there, some by the the Veteran Institute for Procurement, which is where I started giving this presentation. It has two classes, VIP Start for real newbies and VIP Grow for some that are experienced. But it really teaches you all of the things you need to know as a business that you have to put together to be ready to do business and to market to the government and to successfully implement your programs. If people will tell you, hey, government business is complex, they're more complex than a commercial business. The difference is you've got some very well prescribed rules, identified marketplaces, so there's a lot laid out for you that you can take advantage of. And it really is learning the different pieces and not trying to eat an elephant in one bite. Certifications, business and individual, small business certifications, 8A, HubZone, SDVOSB, woman-owned small business, Native American, Alaskan Native, etc. They help open the door, but beyond that, you got to be able to deliver. So I want to take a break on this slide and see if I can get you all to introduce yourself, give me an idea of who you are, what kind of things you're looking for the presentation, what things you want to learn, so I can tune it a little bit better to each of you individually as well as each of you as a group. Can you manage that for me, Janice?
Okay, thank you. Yes, I think listed here first is Diallo Palmer. Diallo, can you introduce yourself, please?
Hi, yes, thank you, Janice. My name is Diallo Palmer, veteran. I have a small business, and I'm looking into starting another business venture, future government contracting.
Can you speak up a little bit, please?
I'm sorry, is this any better?
Yeah, I'm old and hard of hearing.
I'm sorry, is this any better?
Yes.
Yes, my name is Diallo Palmer. I currently have a small business already. Looking to, in the future, open an additional veteran-owned business that's looking to place, to to gain government contracts. So yeah, that's pretty much me in a nutshell.
Okay.
Thank you. Yorcel Arroyo.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Tercel. I own a business that I'm starting right now. It's import and export, but down the road, I may want to do future business with the government. So hope to learn more from this class here.
Thank you very much. We have a guest, Shalom Amon, who is still considering, I think, some businesses. He's down in South Florida. Would you like to introduce yourself, please?
Good morning. This is Shalom, and like Jenny said, I'm looking to start my own business and want to hear more information. Thank you.
Okay. Just as a quick, I'll call it a lessons learned. Just about every seminar you go to that's going to be for small businesses will generally ask you to stand up and give your elevator pitch. Depending upon the audience, they'll ask for different things. But for example, most federal organizations will ask you what service you're in. What does your business do? You know, so it sounded like all of you are pretty much in the early stages of, I know I want to do business, but what do I want to do? I'm doing questions and answers later. I can help you address some of those. Right now, I want to keep it on the main topic of certifications and what value do they give and where would they fall in your overall business plan. I'll reemphasize here, if you can see the business planning governance strategy, that always comes first. If you don't know where you're going, any road will get you there. It really is, the better you plan and the better you know who you are and what you do, the better you'll be at interfacing with other clients and going on the right journey. At the beginning of the presentation, I told you about the old adage that I used to have of, hi, I'm a small business. I do everything for anybody, anywhere, anytime, cheap. Where's my contract? I had a couple people that helped me very early set up, what is it who am I, what do I want to do? And it started out with, well, what do you want to do? I want to be in IT. Well, what part of IT? What do you mean, IT? And it was because IT is such a broad area. When I was able to change to, hi, I'm a small business, I do IT. And I got the same kind of response, thank you very much, but we're not interested. And it took me 11 months to refine that. From, boy, I can deliver everything in IT, so here's what I really specialize in. And once I started doing that, I started getting different responses from folks. Well, okay, but can you do A, B, or C? And A, B, or C were the things that I said I could do before, but I really didn't have the background or the credibility for. There are a number of different options you have for getting these through the VBOC, through SBA, through programs like the Vendor Institute, or the Veteran Institute for Procurement, VA courses that are coming online. So you can pick and choose things that will help you understand the pieces, what they mean to you by doing them, and what you give up by not doing them. And it really is just an allocation and strategy of where do I put my resources to grow and to grow most efficiently. The federal small business certification's basic. They're government-wide set-aside categories such as service-disabled veteran, historically underutilized business-owned, woman-owned, that are set-aside categories. They're generally, they have been self-certified. At least SDVOSB and woman-owned have been self-certified. They're now coming under SBA for an SBA certification process. So as you start looking at any of these, you'll most likely qualify for one, maybe all four. And knowing when to apply, how to apply, and what benefits they give you once you have, this is what I can deliver, it'll be a big help to keep you going. The SBA also has a program, the 8A, which you may have heard about. That is a business development program, not a set-aside program. So it's got different requirements, different benefits. And my intent is not to go through what those are now. That's something you can find a lot of resources online to do. It's a matter to give you a nice flavor for what is the stuff you have to do to start to qualify for any of these categories. The other one, which may be more significant, is veteran-owned businesses, is Department of Veteran Affairs Veterans First Program, and the CVE verification, which is essentially, are you a VA has verification for both service-disabled veteran and veteran. You know, the service-disabled vet is, do you have it on your DD-214? You have a VA disability, or do you have a service disability? And there's other criteria for ownership and control. And as we talk about things like ownership and control, that's one common element that goes across all of these. And when I had on the first slide, governance first, it's the governance pieces that usually people complain about when they've got to prepare them. But quite frankly, they're the kind of things you have to have anyway if you're really going to be in business. As preparation, again, it comes back to the major things are for all programs: ownership, control, and size. When you look at the owner member demographics, that's really the only difference between any of the programs. For service disabled vet or vet under VA, 51% minimum has to be owned by a service disabled vet or a veteran. Woman-owned small business, 51% minimum women. 51% U.S. citizens for hub zones, and for the 8A, 51% socially and economically disadvantaged. In most businesses, this is one person. In a number of businesses, you may have several service-disabled vets that make up the minimum ownership. Hub zone, more typical, you'd have 51% that makes that up. In 8A, it's typically, I haven't seen any with two people, but there could be, but it's typically one person who's socially and economically disadvantaged. A little bit later on, I'll cover what that really means, because it's typically not what people think. The next piece is you need to demonstrate that you meet the small business size standards. If you're an architect, that size standard is different than if you're providing information technology services. And that can be different than if you're providing telecom hosting like an AWS or an Azure. And yes, there are small businesses that do that. Then it's demonstrating that you actually have the ownership and control. So you need formal documentation, which comes back to the governance documents. That, for example, for limited liability company or an LLC, could include the documents of formation when you went to the state and did your registration. They could include the operating agreement, and there may be several other documents that are pertinent to demonstrating ownership and control. SBA and VA will use things like tax returns. The tax returns always have K1s. And with the K1s for a partnership agreement, it tells you, hey, Janice owns 51%, Mark owns 49%, and that's the distribution, and that's what they look for, to make sure that Janice is a service-disabled vet or the socially and economically disadvantaged individual. I can't overemphasize governance comes first, and it really is a collection of normal business governance. You'll hear a lot of people, whether it be the 8A program, but particularly for the veteran-owned programs, will complain like crazy that, boy, look at all this stuff I got to produce and deliver and upload. But when you really look at it, it's all normal business operational documentation you got to have. The other side of that is, if you've heard of protests, you're likely somewhere in your career going to get protested for either size or status. When you do, you have, I think it's 3 or 5 business days to submit the documentation, which is all of your governance documentation. If you've done a good job of preparing it and you're ready for applying for verification, you'll have everything you need pretty much at your fingertips. Are there any questions so far? Again, this is targeted primarily for service disabled vets that may qualify for the 8A program. Go ahead. Jamie, did you have a question? When I started the program, and I can't tell you the flack I got for qualifying for the 8A from a lot of people. You know, you're not socially disadvantaged. And the comments were the 8A program is a welfare program, the 8A program is a social program. And it comes back to, yeah, me, socially disadvantaged, right. I got a lot of comments back. And I'll say it kind of challenged what I thought socially disadvantaged. And socially disadvantaged is often used interchangeably with discrimination. The societal norms for what you think of as social disadvantage or discrimination tend to be very focused, often racial or ethnic. But when you start looking at what it really constitutes discrimination, I will virtually guarantee that everybody on this conference call has at some time experienced some kind of discrimination. And I've got, at the end of the presentation, I've got a list of 31 questions. I'm not going to go through them yet, but basically it's a starting place to say, where should you look? What kind of questions should you ask to see if you have experienced social disadvantage? And in the context of social disadvantage, for 8A, it's prolonged or long-term. You've had it in almost, you know, in any job or something, and it applies to whether you've been able to get education, whether you've been able to get job promotions, interview for job, salary increases, etc. For me, it was really, I had certain service-connected disabilities back from when I was a pilot. I was in an aircraft accident, had a 2-inch steel fence post that glanced off my helmet at more than 110 miles per hour. Yes, I have a hard head, but basically destroyed my helmet. And at the time I had a concussion. And this was at a time when, you got a concussion, get your rear end back in gear and get up there flying again. It turned out to be traumatic brain injury. Took a long time to get it diagnosed properly, but how that manifests itself and understanding what that was, understanding what the real problem was, had a significant impact on my career, promotion, etc. For example, one of the things I started to suffer was vertigo. And vertigo, if you're just looking at it externally, looks a lot like I've been drinking. So if I came back from lunch and had vertigo, even though I didn't have anything to drink, the immediate assumption was I was out drinking on lunch and therefore I was not fit to do a good portion of my job. So when you have issues like that, it's a matter of being able to go back and say, what happened and what was the impact? How they were perceived, the impact that they had. And you can go on and on with some of the different pieces. Do I have control? I'm trying to change. Okay. So the question becomes one of what then is socially disadvantaged? It's personal experiences of substantial and chronic social disadvantage in American society. You can read the chart, you can read the questions later, but things like not living, I'm going to say, I can call it not living directly in American society. If you're in the military, the odds are when you're assigned to a base, even though you might be assigned to someplace like Eglin or Pensacola, or someplace where it's cold up here, your life is going to revolve around your unit, your squadron, and while you may live in a community, you're really not part of the community. You play to a different set of rules. You've got a different set of criteria for promotion and advancement. And then when you take the step out and say, oh, I'm no longer in that group, all of a sudden you're faced with new challenges on all fronts. But you know, this is not the life I led for the last 2 years, 4 years, 10 years, however long it is. So you've got new challenges that affect your ability to get education, employment, business history, and I'm sure if you all went through the employment and resume counselors, what you say and what you did needs to be translated. And sometimes it's not an exact translation. The terminology is going to be different, or maybe even worse, it may be the same but mean totally different things. So it's a lot of effort to transition from where, hey, I'm going to get a promotion from E3 to E4, and this is what it takes, to I'm looking at being promoted from a journeyman to or from an apprentice to a journeyman to, or I'm looking at being a analyst 1 or an analyst 5, and looking at various steps in there. They're different. They require different kinds of preparation, and it's a mental transition. So you look at that, and there is an element of social disadvantage to that, where you've been in the military, you've learned a set of rules, you're subject to UCMJ, and various policies and guidelines. Your contemporaries that did not join the military may have 2, 4, 5, 10, sometimes 20 years of experience in the commercial sector, where that's something totally foreign to you. You may wonder why I put this in there, how to write a winning proposal. When you look at a certification or verification, it is exactly like writing a winning proposal. You've got a set of criteria you need to meet. You're submitting it to a reviewing body. And based upon what you submit and how you present, you're going to achieve success or denial or a never-ending cycle of resubmission. The other is your workload and timeline are based on how well you prepare and understand your customer's requirement. In the case of 8A, it's the Code of Federal Regulations for 8A, which is 13 CFR 124. And understanding what those requirements are. Just like in a proposal, if you can read and understand and follow instructions of how to fill out and how to, the instructions to offers that tell you what to do, the instructions that tell you what the evaluation criteria are, you have the advantage of having all of the evaluation criteria, all of the instructions, and basically it's a matter of following directions and tuning it to the customer. So what I put in here is I didn't do these the first time. I didn't do them right the second time. And what should have been less than a 90-day process turned into more than a 10-month process with the number of denials in the loop. So it goes back to the business process. Same thing if you're applying for SDVOSB status at VA, or if you're looking at from the commercial sector now, there's a couple of companies that do the equivalent of verification, but for large commercial clients. It really is, you have to understand what they're looking for. How do you demonstrate ownership? How do you demonstrate control? And what documentation do you submit, and what does it need to say? And how do you respond to questions that they have when you get a response? That's a whole different piece. Throughout the presentation, I've talked about the business documentation that you need to prepare for your business. When you signed up and registered with the state, be it as an LLC, an S Corp, a C Corp, or some other kind of entity, you will have submitted documentation to the state. You will have received documentation from the state. Following that, you'll typically apply for a tax identification number or employee identification number. And if you're going to pursue federal business, you'll have to register with the System for Award Management. And you get yourself, or I'm sorry, you have to register with Dun & Bradstreet, get a DUNS number, then register with the System for Award Management and get your cage code, and then you can proceed to qualification for some of the different programs. As a veteran or service disabled veteran or status, you'll need your DD-214, VA disability letter, or service disability letter as appropriate. For the 8A program, if you're part of the presumptive groups, and that's part of another discussion, but basically some groups are presumed to be socially and economically socially disadvantaged, excuse me. Most of us probably are not in those groups. So in that, the social disadvantage letter has a very simple format. What's the event? Who, what, when, where did something happen? In 1992, I was working with the Florida Department of Education, and my supervisor, Janice, did XYZ, which caused me to not be eligible for a promotion. Is that kind of tempo, I guess, or that you want to go through? It's what is the event? Who, what, when, where, to the maximum extent possible that you know. What was the impact? Did it affect my job? Did it affect my retention? Did it affect my promotion? With women-owned small businesses, very commonly the women will put in, yeah, when I was in the military, I was a colonel, but they had me because I was a woman go get the coffee. And they excluded me from all of the meetings where the guys were sitting around the table. So consequently, I didn't get to participate in the strategy, the other sessions, and I was left out, which limited my promotion opportunities, limited my evaluations, etc. So you've shown that there were events and what the impact was. For economic disadvantage, it's a standard SBA form that really looks at your net worth and total assets. Not all things are included in the net worth calculation. You know, for example, your primary residence is not included. Money that you have invested in the business is not included. And money that you may have in retirement accounts that you don't have access to without a penalty are typically excluded. And that may have changed.
because you just have to check on what the recent rules are. In there, there's lots of help available from SBA, the Procurement Technical Assistance Centers, the VBOCs, and of course, we all know that VBOCs are best. Veteran service organizations and veteran organizations, as well as veterans that have been through the wars and have the experience to be able to say, this is what you're going to encounter, this is where you have to be careful.
I'm going to skip over the questions part real quick, and I'm going to give you an example. I'm assuming Janice is going to give you the presentation. But in education, it's, have you ever been denied admission? So it's a series of questions, 30-some questions that are taken directly from the regulation. And the regulation is just, these are examples. So it's not all inclusive, but it's intended to let you think about, maybe some of these things happened to me. Did I experience these? And look at, in the education, I'm a slow changer here.
Hello, Mark.
Yeah.
Good. You can hear me. I have a question from a slide, a couple of slides back. On the 8A, you showed there was a way to show social disadvantage and economic disadvantage. Is it required that you do both, or will either one of those be sufficient?
If you're a member of one of the presumptive groups, which are, I don't track them anymore as far as what they are, but there's a list of presumptive groups that are given in the regulation, which is why a lot of people call it a social program, but it's not. If you're in a presumptive group, you do not, I believe you do not require a letter. And again, that may have changed, but basically you're assumed to be socially disadvantaged.
Okay, thank you.
If you're not in the presumptive groups, you will require that letter. It's more of an art form to write. And in any case, across the board, you will require to demonstrate that you are economically disadvantaged. The general criteria for economic disadvantage now is, of the assets that count to get into the program, you have to have a net worth of less than $750,000. So that does not include your primary residence. It does not include the investment in your business, and does not include the IRAs or other retirement that you have where withdrawal would be subject to a penalty. And again, it's been a while since I applied. I know there's some changes. So if you do get ready to apply for any of these programs, you can listen to old farts like me, but you need to go back. It's the old trust but verify, because invariably a number of things will have changed. Sometimes even changing of the personnel reviewing the documentation can make a difference in how the documents and how your submissions are interpreted. So play to that. But yes, everybody has to submit the economic disadvantage paperwork, and you may or may not have to submit the socially disadvantaged paperwork. Does that answer your question, Janice?
Yes, that helps very much. And also, we have some links in the chat box for sba.gov and vboc.org. The VBOC here in Florida, we have someone in our office that is very technically professional in understanding this also. So we would be happy to help out any of our clients with questions they have as follow-up for this.
Okay. Are there any other questions?
have another question. If you could comment about what it costs to get certified, if there's any cost, or if we should ever seek out a third-party person or company to help us get a certification. Is this something people can do on their own for free? You know, what's involved, or if it gets complex, you know, definitely the VBOC is here to help everyone. But we know that there's some organizations that, I hate to say this, but seem to take advantage of people by saying that they must pay for this.
Going to an organization that requires payment is optional. Again, when you go back and you look at what's required, as far as forming the documentation, you can do it all on your own. Although there are some documents that I really would suggest you get help from an attorney. And those have to do with primarily the operating agreement as an LLC or the bylaws as a corporation, because there's a number of things in there that if you don't understand them, you'll create more problems than you will solve. If you go to a buddy and the buddy say, hey, this one got me through, the odds are if you use it, you're going to wind up running around in circles trying to answer questions from any one of the verifying or certifying bodies. So that's the one area that I would seek legal counsel, is in the operating agreement or bylaws. Again, it's not necessary. And if you're familiar with that, you can probably get by on your own. The organizations such as the VBOC, PTAC, National Veteran Small Business Coalition, several of the other veteran service organizations have folks that can help you at no charge. I would exhaust those first. You mostly, the rules have changed a little bit, but basically, since they, for example, almost all of you will probably be looking at some kind of CV, service disabled veteran or veteran verification, either through VA now or when it goes government wide in a couple of years. The rules are such that if you make a boo-boo on what you submit, they'll come back to you and give you a chance to correct it. So in some cases, you can take a shot and say, okay, I don't want to spend the money. It's a balance of what do you need to know, what do you need to learn, and what's going to get you there most efficiently. It's easy to say, I don't want to spend $1,000 on a lawyer, but that $1,000 also translates to, if you do it on your own, probably a lot more in your time and energy than $1,000. So I used to do it for free, and everybody said I should charge. And when I charged, it was no fun. So I went back to free. And so you can generally get any question or anything answered by any one of the groups, or they'll know somebody that can answer it. So I would not just by default go to somebody that charges, but use that as a decision. Am I better served by developing this myself or by going to a professional?
Thank you, Mark. That's what we also say here at the VBOC, because we do have the expertise in-house to be able to help, especially with veteran clients. And so we would like to help you out first before you spend money on something that you could get for free. But also, can you speak about any penalties? Because I know that if there's some type of false information in obtaining the certification, generally speaking, that's just an error or an omission. But we have heard about one case, at least, where somebody deliberately gave false information, got government contracts, got awarded that money, and then was required to pay it back, and possibly, I don't know the full story, but also may have faced some prison time and or fines. Do you have any experience in that knowledge area?
I have yes and no. I participated and watched a number of cases like that. I'm aware of a number of cases, and basically, if you lie, you will face significant penalties. If you inadvertently put something in that's incorrect, you may face a nice ride, but probably not penalties. So be honest. Don't try and skirt issues and stuff. Don't try and get smart by listening to some of the folks that think they're smart. And I will tell you, there are a lot of veterans that think they're really smart and going to give you advice. And if you don't understand it, avoid it. Because there are things that you can inadvertently do that will get you in trouble. It's just a question of, what kind of trouble. Like Janice said, there's some where you went out and got contracts and you had to pay money back under the False Claims Act, which is you pay, you get $5 million for the work, you pay back $5 million. You go to jail for a period of time, and you are then basically forbidden from doing government contract work for a period of time, sometimes forever. If you make a mistake, generally you're given a chance to correct it. And yes, I have seen some where the government has told the company to do a certain thing, they did that thing, and then they came back and threatened them with some kind of legal action. But that got high visibility and attention and got corrected very fast. So be honest. If you don't know the answer, ask. What is it? What do I put here? What do I do? And if you still don't get an answer, just be honest with the answer. Say, yeah, I think so. I mean, not quite like that. Most of the stuff has a very clean black and white answer. And it's not until you get into larger business enterprises with multiple partners and complex types of organizations where you start getting into things that don't have clear answers. But by then you can afford the big high-priced attorneys. So right now, keep it simple, keep it honest. I'll tell you one of the adages I learned, which is never, ever, 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 ever try and cheat the government. But the second adage is because you're entitled to more than you could ever cheat them out of. So go for the entitlement part. Did that answer your question in too many words?
It did. Very good. That's what I thought, but I wanted to make sure that that was clarified too. The difference between inadvertent mistakes and then deliberate cheating the government, basically.
Yes.
And we're coming toward the top of the hour, but I just have another couple of things that maybe you could help explain a little bit more. Is there an advantage to having multiple certifications? In other words, will the government say you've got two, so you get more advantage, or do they look at each one individually as to what they might need for a particular contract?
There's usually more of an advantage with prime contractors. Sometimes with the government, if you've got more than one, it makes it convenient for them to make each agency in the government is measured on their participation and achievement in each one of the small business categories. So if you're an 8A, they get credit for an 8A. If you're an SDVOSB, they get credit for an SDVOSB, HubZone, etc. So if you're an 8A, SDVOSB, HubZone, woman-owned small business, they get credit for all of those. And it makes it easier for them to make their numbers with one procurement. So yes, there's an advantage, but it comes back to you got to be able to add value, because there's a whole bunch of people that have multiple certifications. A lot. Now you're talking probably several hundred in each category. I think like 15% of the SDVOSBs are hub zones. A large percentage are woman-owned. A large percentage of them are 8As. So when you're talking numbers of typically 20,000, you may have several hundred sometimes with multiple categories. And of that, you may have 30 or 40 that are capable of doing the work.
Okay. We do have a question here. It says, say I'm a female veteran with a service disability rating for some sort, and I'm a minority. Which should be at the top of my list?
As far as the certifications,
Right.
Is a service disability rating from VA or from the service?
I would assume probably from the service.
How long have you been in business?
What if I'm a new business? Do I have to have some sort of history in order to be awarded a contract as a prime contractor?
If you're a new business, in here, the easiest and quickest is to get the service disabled vet status and the woman-owned small business status.
So just kind of go for both of those. If you qualify for two, try to get both of them. And then if I want to apply or compete with a contract, then I'm competing in both areas.
Yeah, I mean, the woman-owned should come very quickly, although there is now a program for certification for women-owned.
Mm-hmm.
And I believe that SBA is doing some, and they've also got some third-party certifiers such as WeBank. That's WENC.
Yes, we just got notified about the woman-owned small business. That used to be self-certified, but starting, I believe, in September, is going to require certification through the SBA. So we can provide some information on that if anyone is interested. And also, is there, you might know this off the top of your head, but are there recertification timelines? In other words, if I get a certification, is it good for 5 years, or is it a one and done forever, I'm certified?
The service disabled vet recertification is every 3 years through VA. I think it's going to stay at 3 years when SBA takes it over, but I'm not sure. And in some cases, you have to do an annual recertification as to size. And that's going to vary by program. The 8A program, there's an annual update review. And basically it's looking at the basic issues of the 8A program. So the 8A is annual. The hub zone is every 3 years. And I do not know what the women-owned small business will be.
Okay. Well, my suggestion on that for anybody that does get certified is to make sure that when you get your certification, just review the documentation that you get that verifies your certification, and mark that on your calendar, you know, like anything that would expire a month or two before it expires, so that you're fully prepared, you don't lose that certification and have to reapply from the very start again. So that's been some good information, and we are getting close to the top of the hour, and I'd like to invite anyone to take yourself off mute and ask some questions if you have them. Something you may think of might be something someone else is thinking about too.
Hello again, Drusel here. I have a question. In one of the requirements for the small business, veteran small business, I saw that you must be full-time. Dedicate full time to the company, but on my current situation is that I work for another company that pays the bills, and I cannot dedicate myself to 8 hours in my company. What is considered full time?
Full-time requirements have changed. They no longer require full-time. They do recognize that for startups, you must have some income, and a lot of people will work for another company. I would suggest you take a look at the VA website for Center for Verification and Evaluation, and check on that question. But as far as I know, full-time is no longer required. Actually, full-time was never really required, but that's another story. It's just a lot of things made it into the requirement that shouldn't have been there.
And I think that also goes back to the control and ownership of the business.
Yes.
The 51%, as long as you're just over half of the ownership and control, then you are the one who is considered qualified for that certification by that standard also. And we can verify that for you. But I believe that Mark is correct in that it's no longer a full-time requirement. And like I say, we've got someone here in our office that works very closely with all of this sort of subject matter. And I'll be happy to refer you to him to answer any specific questions like that.
And one of the things that was an issue is there is no definition, either by statute or regulation, as to what constitutes full-time. So, that was an issue. It was always presumed by some groups to be 40 hours a week. Not so. It is, there are two things that they often look for is business hours and are you full-time? Both of those are defined by the company and can be anything you want. So it's one of those things to be careful of. If you ever get a site visit, they'll ask you for how many hours a week do you work? The answer is I devote full-time to the business. And you don't have to answer what full-time is. You just answer per the regulation and what's required in regulation, period. Don't make any presumptions. Don't volunteer information. I dealt with one company that was telling me they had questions come from the government. They told me they put in a response and told me it was about 2 pages long. And I asked them, how many questions did they get as follow-up? And it was a lot. So it's basically yes, no, understand what the regulation says relative to what they're asking and reply in accordance with the regulation. But like was said before, do not lie.
Very good. Thank you, Mark. Have we got any other questions? I did put some links in the chat box, and they include the VBOC, which is our organization, and our partner organization, the SBAs. And we also have Mark's LinkedIn and his professional business website there. And if you have any questions after this is over, feel free to let me know. And I can be reached at the VBOC email address, which is in that, the contact us. You can reach us through that.
I'm easy to work with if you've got a beach house in Destin Beach. I'm really easy to work with.
All of Florida is wonderful, especially when you're in Virginia, right?
We looked at coming back. My wife is from Pensacola. So,
Well, it's certainly beautiful most of the year, and we even deal with the hurricanes very well.
but I will tell you honestly, I lived in Minnesota and I lived in Pensacola, and Pensacola was the coldest place I've ever been.
People are kind of surprised sometimes. I think that Northwest Florida does get very cold. We really do have 4 seasons here.
When the temperature was low, I could not get warm.
Wow. Well, it's pretty warm nowadays here. But if no one else has questions, we'll end with this, and I'll follow up with the attendees by email. And Mark, we certainly appreciate your expertise in taking the time today to do this for us. And I look forward to working with everybody in the future.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.